it occurred to me recently that while I've seen quite a bit of Greg Davies' work, primarily Taskmaster, appearances on shows like Would I Lie to You, and the more recent The Cleaner, which I only watched because Helena Bonham Carter was in, but I thoroughly enjoyed his performance, it occurred to me that I'd never seen his stand-up. Luckily for me, there is at least one of his stand-up shows on Netflix. There may be another one. I haven't checked, but certainly I can say that I will look out for more of his stand-up, because after watching You Magnificent Beast, I really thoroughly enjoyed his stand-up routine. So I'm not going to give away any of the humour. I'm not going to retell any of his jokes, but I will just explain a little bit of the kind of content you can expect. But ultimately, I'm just doing this audio to say, if you like Greg Davies, you really, really need to watch this, because it's fabulous. Directed by Peter Orton, written, of course, by Greg Davies, and one of my favourite things about Greg Davies as a comedian is that he's very self-aware. He knows that he is not, shall I say, a Hollywood hunk. He is very tall. He makes a lot of reference to his stomach, even though he's not that big, but obviously when you're taller, everything just seems bigger. He's quite well built, and he makes a lot of reference to this, but not in a way that makes you feel uncomfortable, sorry. There are comedians who will sometimes point out their own physical flaws, and it just feels a bit awkward. It's kind of like you think they're fishing for compliments, even though obviously nobody's actually going to heckle with a compliment. But that's certainly not the case with Greg here. When he references his height or anything like that, which, it's baked into the title, You Magnificent Beast, he's titled this ironically. And I have to say, the story he tells, I don't know how true it is, but the story he tells in which he was given the name of this, You Magnificent Beast, is brilliant. That in itself is fantastic. And I like how self-aware he is, but it doesn't feel like he's fishing for compliments. Not at all. And that's really inviting, and it makes the rest of the show feel really genuine. And he then goes on to tell quite a few personal things, and a lot of this is about his parents. His anecdotes about his mother, I love. I love the way he talks about his mother. And I'd love to meet her and genuinely ask her, what do you think about the things he says on stage? Because they're fabulous and fabulously funny, but maybe awkward as well. He also discusses memories of his father. His father passed away. This was released in 2018, so I believe a couple of years before that. I'm not 100% confident. But he talks about his father, and a lot of the show is him building up to a kind of epitaph of his father, and the ways in which that are done through these anecdotes and just to whet your appetite, some singing, is really moving, but really funny. And not every comedian can do that. Again, it comes back to comfort. A lot of comedians will try and tackle tricky subjects in a light-hearted manner because it's kind of what we like from comedy, because we can't do that in the real world. And often when other comedians try and do it, it just falls flat. But not here at all. With regards to fresh jokes, fresh humour, I was only aware of one of the stories he told. And it was a story he told on Taskmaster. I won't say which one, but I will say that if you're aware of the story, it's not quite as funny, but at the same time it is, because there's a separate element to that part of the story that appears later on, and it just makes it unforgettable, partly for the right reasons, sometimes very much for the wrong reasons. But ultimately, it's an absolute joy. And one of my favourite stories, I won't tell you anything about it, but when you get to the story, he is talking about dates. And he goes to his friend's house to visit his friends. I'm glad he's a better storyteller than I am. And he's basically been set up with, I think, the sister of one of the friends, one of the couple. And the story he tells about this sister, I howled. I loved it. It was so funny. That for me was one of my favourite anecdotes. It's quite lengthy. A lot of his stories in this take up a bit of time. He's certainly not a one-liner comedian. There are a few anecdotes that are neatly packaged, but a lot of them are fluid, and he goes back and forth, and he never loses his stream, never loses his train of thought. Laughs at himself the appropriate amount. I cannot abide comedians who laugh at everything they say. I just think it's so bizarre. But he does laugh a little bit, which is good. I don't like kind of cold comedians who just tell stories and don't show any humour, because then you've got nothing to bounce off of. A comedian who's light-hearted on stage and is happy to laugh along, very different to laughing at oneself. If they're happy to laugh along, that that warmth does kind of vibrate around the room. I thoroughly enjoyed this. As my first look at Greg Davies' stand-up, I think it's absolutely fantastic, and I'm definitely inspired, absolutely desperate, by which I mean to check out his other stand-ups. There's Greg Davies Live, Firing Cheese Balls at a Dog, which is from 2011, and there's Greg Davies Live, The Back of My Mum's Head, which is from 2013. Apparently that also stars Ed Gamble. I believe Ed Gamble was his warm-up act at one point. Really looking forward to the other ones. If you can recommend any of his shows, let me know. I've seen bits of Man Down. I've seen every season of Taskmaster at least twice. Really, really looking forward to checking out his others. If you haven't seen this and you like stand-up comedy, check it out on Netflix. I promise you will not be disappointed.